Now, we could complain about it, oh, woe is me, or we could realize that the implications of our freedom are in part revealed by the fact that we can choose to pay the price of speaking the truth, even if it's costly. In fact, if it weren't costly, maybe there wouldn't be such heroism and human dignity involved in speaking the truth. Maybe it's only that the commissar may actually come around and lock up Vaclav Havel and his colleagues for the anti-totalitarian rhetoric that they distributed via samizdat in underground publications. Maybe the possibility of that cost is what makes so human and so heroic their act. And without the specter of that cost, they could never really show themselves to be living fully within the truth, to be eschewing the easy comfort of the lie. There had to be a cost in order for it to be a heroic act in the first place.
Well, Glenn, your eyes light up whenever you talk about your favorite students. Tell me about some of your favorite times teaching at Brown University.
Well, yes, I have had some great experiences with students at Brown. I remember the second year that I was at Brown, 2006, 2007, teaching a course on mass incarceration. And it was an extraordinary class of young people who went on to do great things, who were very eager and enthusiastic to engage with me on the subject matter, who were studious to a fault, who wrote like gods and goddesses. They would, one of them is writing for the New Yorker now. Several of them went on to law school at Yale and Stanford, and they challenged me and they encouraged me, but they also inspired me. So that was a special. That I had only been at Brown a year when I started this. I was preparing and teaching the course to give some lectures at Stanford on the same subject. Race, Incarceration, and American Values is the small book of mine that came out of giving those lectures. And those students who took my classes on race and incarceration in the 2006-2007 academic year were a big boon to me in getting that course prepared. Another special relationship I recall with a student, the young David Sachs is his name. He's a classics major at Brown. Not any longer. He was when we encountered each other. In his freshman year, he came and sought me out. Classics major, I'm sitting in the economics department. And David wanted to talk to me about free inquiry in the modern world, about opening up the university to the views of people who might be more conservative, about fighting against the stultifying uniformity that he thought characterized the student's intellectual life as he was experiencing Brown. He said, "I can't breathe. I'm dying over here. I need to talk about these complicated issues in an open way." And he and I launched and I don't do this often, year-long, 2-semester independent study relationship where he got full credit for a course in each of the 2 semesters, working one-on-one with me. We put together a reading list of classical and contemporary works on the question of freedom of expression and intellectual liberty, and everything from Plato, the Apology of Socrates, the Allegory of the Cave, to John Milton, Areopagitica, Milton's defense against the imposition of the crown to license books, and John Stuart Mill on liberty, of course. But we read 20th century authors like Vaclav Havel, George Orwell, and others, Alan Bloom. We read widely. He wrote these marvelous papers that, in his classics style, were heavily referenced and lingered on the beauty of the language of some of these works as well as on the ideas. And we developed a fast friendship. And over the course of that year, we decided in the second semester of that independent study that we would create a course that we would teach together. He was now in his second year at Brown. He had 2 more years to go. And in each of the successive 2 years, he and I offered for 20 undergraduates a seminar on free inquiry in the modern world, grounded in the text that he and I had first explored together in the independent study. He was my undergraduate teaching assistant and functioned more as a colleague than he did as an assistant. And it was just wonderful. Those are 2 examples of terrific experiences that I've had in teaching at Brown.
They're just extraordinary stories on so many levels. I love Havel's The Power of the Powerless, and it's so relevant today, just as when it was written. But there's also something so remarkable to me about a freshman walking into your office in search of truth, asking for your time and your help, and you being presumably busy, having lots of other obligations, and taking time out for one student who presumably you don't know at all, who's just appeared, and you forming this relationship with him and going on to do so much and to mentor him. It's just incredible, and I think so rare.
Thank you. I agree. It is both incredible and, in my experience, not so often encountered. I mean, I can't tell that story 10 times over because it hasn't happened 10 times over in my 50 years of college teaching. David's an extraordinary young man, though. I mean, we're still in touch. He's finishing up at Stanford Law School now. And I didn't mention that he is a first-rate concert pianist as well.
Wow.
There's a Brahms piano concerto in B minor that I saw him perform with the Brown Orchestra, a Brahms concerto, and he really knocked it out of the park. So he's an exceptional individual. But yeah, and Brown is the kind of place that you can come across these kinds of extremely talented young people. I mean, it's not the only place. Of course, there's UATX, but...
Totally. But I wanted to start with this because I graduated in 2022 from the University of Chicago, and I loved my experience in many ways, but I also found that there was such void on campus, for lack of a better term, that so many of my peers and I, we felt so wayward. And this was during COVID when we had faculty wearing masks to survive a flu with a 99+% survival rate for the overwhelming majority of the population. 3 members of my community were shot and killed on the South Side within 1 year while I was on campus. So it was this climate of fear for physical safety, as well as the fear of engaging with peers and faculty from behind masks, which many of us already suspected were performative, but we couldn't see each other's facial expressions. And being in a climate like that, it was very difficult to find community, camaraderie, and mentorship from the faculty. So for me personally, when I hear a story again of you really taking a student under your wing the way you did and you building this trust with them to learn alongside them, that type of mentorship and hierarchy too, if you're taking someone and leading them through these amazing readings, which I assume he had not yet encountered. I assume he did not already know Plato and Havel.
Well, he knew Plato because he's a classics guy. He's the one who introduced me in a family. Of course, I knew about the Apology of Socrates, but I had never really studied it carefully and asked all the kinds of questions that came up when he and I went over it together. But no, he didn't know about Havel. He didn't know about the power of the powerless, which I agree is a masterwork and a marvelous invitation to reflect upon human freedom and what it means to live within the lie, to flow along with the crowd down the river of pseudo-life. This is Havel. And to live within the truth. And where the power, the subversive power, the revolutionary power to overturn tyranny can be found in the human heart. I mean, this is, really pretty amazing stuff. So yeah, he and I had a wonderful time together. And yeah, it is beautiful. And I'm sorry for your loss, Audrey. I'm from Chicago. I grew up on the South Side. I know where Hyde Park is, and I know the kinds of neighborhoods that surrounds the university there, that surround the university. And it's, 3 people lost their lives, and that's tragic, though we don't want to forget that there are many who are not affiliated with the university who are living in those environments who are dealing with that kind of travail. And COVID, oh, please don't even get me started. I mean, what a mass hysteria we endured. I agree. I saw a report by the education economist, Eric Hanashek is his name. He's at Stanford, chronicling the loss of economic benefit from school closures during that period, and it's astronomical. I mean, $30 trillion when you take the present discounted value of all of the foregone earnings that will not be enjoyed because of the lost acquisition of cognitive abilities that occurred in virtue of the wholesale closing for all that time of educational institutions. And, of course, the people who, he argues, were most adversely affected were the least advantaged people. There were people from low-income homes and so on. But the enforced consensus of safetyism, that's what Heather McDonald, a writer I know and admire at the Manhattan Institute, calls it. The performative dimension of it, sure, and the social opprobrium cast upon those who would dare to say anything about it, So it was not a good look how our society dealt with the real, there was a real problem, but we used our fear of that to impose upon ourselves a regime, a cloistered kind of paranoid regime that had great damage, did great damage.
And which we're still feeling that damage, as you've articulated, with the loss of education and really just how the community fell apart, not just the university community, but the Hyde Park community. It was really devastating to local businesses and families and all the kids who suddenly couldn't go to school like normal and be with their friends. It was really, really a heartbreaking time. And particularly shocking. It stood out to me because in some ways I wonder sometimes if the university is almost the last polis. And what I mean by that is it's the last place or one of the last places where people who have very different interests, whether it's physics or writing, come together in pursuit of truth alongside one another for a set period of time to actually pass each other on the quad every day, not just with their AirPods in, commuting to their cubicle, isolated, but there's something unique about the range of interests of people on campus in person. And when you lose that suddenly because everything's on Zoom, you really feel it. I felt like we were living through the loss of this really special living organism.
Amen to that. I know that my life changed with the advent of COVID. I know that I used to go to the office every day at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd have my coffee and I'd read my mail and I'd get myself organized and I'd sit at my desk and shuffle the papers and look at the books and, begin to engage with the day. I'd see colleagues, students. I might go out for a 15-minute jaunt just to catch my breath and then come and sit back down again. And once I stopped going to the office, I never went back. I have not gone back to the office. I've been working from home. Once I got, Zoom meetings, I can remember trying to do classes, with 20 or 25 faces filling up the screen. I, of course, am teaching when I teach in person now. I don't do that by Zoom anymore. But I do almost all my meetings by Zoom. I do my office hours by Zoom. I run my podcast largely by Zoom. Very seldom as I am here now, face-to-face with an interlocutor. It was the year of COVID, 2020, 2021, 2022, that occasioned this shift. And I've just never gotten back to the patterns that characterized my life prior thereto.
And yet you have chosen to continue teaching when I would guess that given how you write and your podcast, that if you had wanted to leave the world of in-person conversation and really focus on media, I assume you could have done that, and you've chosen instead to somehow juggle both, to really be involved actively in communities while also being very online. And I wonder if you have advice for young people interested in getting into media, whether it's through writing or podcasting. What advice do you have for having one foot in a place grounded in the real world and another foot in, on X, let's say?
I don't know quite what to say to that question. I'm not sure I have any useful advice. I would encourage people to go for it. If you have an idea, you have a motivation, something you think you have to say, go for it. I'll tell you a story. I have a grandson. His name is Will Kelly. And he's a TikTok influencer. Mm-hmm. Will Kelly weighed 600 pounds. He was morbidly obese. We were so very concerned about him. He's in his 20s. And he decided to do something about it. And he decided to document what he was doing about it by making these 10, 15-minute videos that he puts up on TikTok and Instagram, where he talks to the camera about, this is a fast food restaurant that I used to love to visit. Mm-hmm. And here is the meal. And he has a videographer who follows him around and takes the photo, the pictures. Here's the meal that I used to eat. And it was 3 hamburgers and onion rings and fries. And he really ate like that. That's how he got to be 600 pounds. I don't eat like this anymore. I'm not going to eat this food, am I? I'm not going to eat it, am I? And he's tempted, of course, but he doesn't. He gives it away to someone who could make better use of it than he. But he documents his transition. I won't tell you how much he weighs now because he won't tell me. It's probably 100, 150 pounds less, but he's still in the works. You can find him. Will Kelly Wins is his handle. And he's doing this. Anyway, I tell that story just to say, this kid decided, A, to change his life, and B, to tell the world about it. And he's making a business out of it for himself, as well as a kind of fulfillment of his personality and his ambition. And he's getting the benefit of the discipline that comes from the accountability that issues from it. Anyway, I go on too long. Go for it. But my advice is go for it.
Someone told me recently that AI will render intellect obsolete. And I'm inclined to think that's crazy, though I would love to hear
Render
your
what
response.
obsolete?
Intellect.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I guess I can see the argument. We have an automated system that's so powerful that we don't have to think anymore. We just input our desires, and it outputs the consummation, how to consummate our desires or something. No, I mean, I'm not a philosopher, but I'm inclined to say the meaning of life the search for the meaning of life can't be delegated to a robot. It's something that has to happen within each of us as we try to get our minds around ponder the meaning of our existence. Intellect. I did once read a short story about how a scientist was in despair and actually ended up committing suicide because she's a mathematician, figured out that automation was actually able to prove the theorems more effectively than she could, and she didn't see any point in going on if that were going to be the case. And I was really shaken by that story because the thought that the doing of math or of science could be more effectively done by a robot was all too credible. And yet the implications of that were so frightening. But tell me, Audrey, why do you think that that's not going to come to be the case?
I hope that for as many mistakes as we make as humans, that we recognize still that technology is a tool and that the end of life is not just habit stacking and endless productivity, but that even if my phone can replace a lot of my current job, that I still have however many hours in the day, every day, to make the best usage of my time and to lead a meaningful life. And I think to do that, wrestling with big ideas, being educated, talking to people I admire, I think all of that really, really matters. And intellect plays a role in all of those interactions, no matter how technology progresses. So I hope that even as AI accelerates, that I don't know. I just think part of being human is our intellect and is actually sometimes getting off of our screens. I think we almost cease to be human if we're just always plugged in. That's us surrendering our humanity.
Well, I am inclined to agree with that, surrendering humanity. I can remember having a conversation with some people I work with on my podcast, and I was asked the hypothetical question: suppose that you got, a gazillion likes and 100 million wonderful comments, and, you were getting a lot of traffic, and people, quote unquote, were listening to you, but you were to be told that they weren't real people. They were bots that were writing the comments, giving you the gratifying feedback, giving you the traffic, giving you the advertising revenue at YouTube. Would you care? To which my answer was, I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I wouldn't care. But then, if I didn't care, one thing I'd realize is that I would have become part of the machine. I would no longer be a person. I would merely be, it's like the Borg in the Star Trek TV show, we are the Borg, resistance is futile, trying to assimilate everybody. My personhood would have become it's like if you rely upon a robot for sexual gratification, for relationship feedback that makes you feel wanted and loved. You've kind of surrendered to the machine. You've become integrated with the mechanical world, and there's something soulless about that, it seems to me, although it might feel good.
In the short term,
Yeah.
It might feel good. Yes.
Right up until the time we're in despair, realizing that you've lost your humanity and that you've been reduced to a cog in a machine, you decide it's not worth going on living anymore. Not you personally, of course. One decides this.
Right. Well, and I would love your reaction. I don't know if you've seen this, but on March 31st, the University of Austin released its new admissions policy. And I would love to hear your thoughts, because when we announced the policy, we wrote, college admissions are unjust, not just biased, not just broken, unjust. Students spend high school anxiously stacking their resumes with hollow activities, then collect generic recommendation letters and outsource their essays to tutors or AI. Admissions at elite colleges now come down to who you know, your identity group, or how well you play the game. The system rewards manipulation, not merit. It selects for conformity, not character. That's why we're introducing the University of Austin's new admissions policy. If you score 1460 on the SAT, 33 on the ACT, or 105 on the CLT, you will be automatically admitted, pending basic eligibility and an integrity check. Below that threshold, you'll be evaluated on your test scores, AP IB results, and 3 verifiable achievements, each described in a single sentence. That's it. We care about 2 things: intelligence and courage. Intelligence to succeed in a rigorous intellectual environment. We don't inflate grades. Courage to join the first ranks of our truth-oriented university. College admission should be earned, not inherited, bought, or gamed. At UATX, your merit earns you a place and full tuition scholarship. It's a long tweet, and I can't claim credit for the phrasing, which I love, but I would be interested to hear your thoughts on being merit first, refusing to inflate grades, trying to work around, not just trying, but successfully, I think, working around the AI-generated essays by just focusing on test scores for this admissions policy.
Yes, I did see that announcement, and I was stunned by it. I thought how revolutionary, frankly. I mean, you could quibble. Test scores are not the be-all and end-all of intellectual achievement, and any instrument is going to measure whatever it's seeking to measure with a noisy error and so on. So there could be people with not so great test scores who could nevertheless become truly outstanding students. But then the question becomes, how would you know? And if you don't have the test score, then what are you going to use? And if the other things that are being used to assess fitness are themselves subject to being gamed and outsourced and manipulated, then have you really solved the problem? No, you haven't. This is a digression, but I once had the opportunity speaking to my students about writing an essay for credit in the course. I'd say, of course, you could go to AI and get it to write the essay for you, and I might or might not find out when we run it through the check, search the web for the wording and see. But I ask you to consider, you write a paper, I read the paper. That's intimate. That's like me having you to my home for dinner. You write, expressing yourself. I read and react to what you've expressed. I share of myself, you share of yourself. I'm the evaluator, true. It's a hierarchical relationship. You want a good grade, you're going to try to do your best. You're going to try to impress me. But if I were to invite you to dinner, would you send a robot?
No.
And then get a report back about how the dinner went? No. Well, I'm inviting you to dinner, quote unquote. I'm inviting you to share with me your thoughts, and I'm going to give you my time, and I'm going to react to it. And if you let a machine write that, it's just as if you were to show up in the person of a robot with a good recording device at my dinner table, and what a shame that would be. So I like that. We're committed to merit, excellence. That's all we care about. I like that. And I've been a critic of racial affirmative action. I wasn't disappointed by the Supreme Court's decision in 2023 on behalf of the Students for Fair Admissions, the Asian students who were concerned that they were discriminated against by affirmative action at Harvard and the University of North Carolina. I think there may have been a time in American history when some consideration of race in the admissions process could perhaps be justified, but that time has long since passed. And in any case, we're here in the 21st century, and I can tell you just in the little bit of time that I've spent here in Austin around UATX, I think the results speak for themselves.
I do too. I've found much of what I was looking for during my undergraduate years here. I'm learning a great deal. And in closing, I wanted to talk briefly about language and political correctness. You wrote this really fascinating paper, I think in 1994, on
it was published in 94.
Correctness.
It took me 5 years to get it written, but yeah, it came out in the journal Rationality and Society in 1994.
Well, it reads as though it were written today. And I know that you have a book forthcoming this summer on self-censorship, I assume building on this article. And I wonder if you can preview it for us a little bit, tell us a little bit of the rationale behind this book.
Well, yes, I'm in my 70s and was a college professor in the 1980s and 1990s, and I saw what I thought to be the damage that my student David Sachs was complaining about, who I've mentioned earlier in this conversation, when he came into my office and when we undertook the reading course that I've described, which is groupthink, conformity, one right opinion, censorious reaction to people who are out of step with the party line, the kind of thing that Havel writes about when talking about totalitarianism in Eastern Europe under Soviet hegemony. Of course, it wasn't Soviet commissars coming around and dragging you off to the gulag. It was more being shunned or ostracized or thought ill of because you were religious, because you were conservative politically, because you had some questions about latter-day feminism that, as a woman, you didn't think were the feminists were getting it right, or whatever. And the ideas that many people will not say what they really think because they don't want to be thought ill of by their colleagues. And that creates a closed climate. And I was observing that. I was observing people ducking the rhetorical contest and opting out of engagement because they didn't want to be thought poorly of. And I thought, what a shame. And I thought, as an economist, is there something that I can say analytically about how that kind of process works and why it sustains itself? And I thought that there was, and I tried to develop an argument. It's a signaling argument, really, a signaling argument where what signaling is taking an action that's observable, which action faithfully conveys the information about something that's not observable. So, for example, a borrower may want to convey that they have confidence in the quality of the investment that they're trying to get an investor to make. Putting their own money on the line is one way to signal that they have confidence in the quality of the enterprise. So collateral or an equity requirement is a natural thing to expect to see when people are trying to get other people to give them their money for an investment, because you can convey your confidence in the quality of the investment by your willingness to put your own money in. There are many examples of this sort. Education, it may be that the actual degree doesn't objectively increase the productivity of the worker all that much, but the ability to get the degree does credibly convey to someone like an employer that the person with the degree is got the intellectual ability to get the degree and therefore may also be a productive worker. The degree per se may not convey that much, but the ability to get it is a good signal of the likelihood that the worker will be productive going forward. Well, signaling also can work with respect to political speech. The willingness to say something may provide information about the unobserved convictions, beliefs, and orientations of the person who's saying it. So what's an example there? I may think that there's a clear biological distinction to be drawn between being a woman and being a man. It has to do with the chromosomes, the X and the Y, or the X and the X. 2 X's is a woman, an X and a Y is a man. Now, in a population of 100 million people, there may be 1,000 for whom that dichotomy doesn't work exactly because of this or that abnormality, but on the whole, that's what a woman and a man is. I may think that. But I don't want to be thought of as transphobic. Now, so I get asked at a congressional hearing, what's the difference between a woman and a man? And I could say, well, the difference is a man has an X and a Y chromosome. A woman doesn't have a Y chromosome. That's an X and an X. And that could even be objectively demonstrable as a matter of biological conviction. But my willingness to say that might convey the signal to a listener that I don't care about the well-being of trans people, that I'm on the wrong side of that question. And so I don't say it. That is, I don't say it unless I really am transphobic. Some people are transphobic. This example goes on. It's an extended example of the idea that the Speech Act can be a signal for an unobserved but important moral or political or value commitment of a person. The idea is that those people who are willing to incur the cost of being thought of as the kind of person who says the X and the Y chromosome is what counts, those people disproportionately are people who really are less concerned about the well-being of trans people than someone who's unwilling to say that. And then if I care about trans people, but I also think that the X and Y chromosome is a thing to attend to, I may not say what I actually think because I don't want to be thought of as one of those people. I don't want to be thought of as an anti-Semite. I may have some criticism of Israel that I don't voice because I don't want people to think I'm the kind of person who would say this kind of thing. I don't want to be thought of as a racist. I may have some criticisms, and I do, of affirmative action, which I am reluctant to voice because I don't want to be thought to be the kind of person who would say this thing in a situation where the only people who are saying this thing are in fact those who, or disproportionately tend to be those who have the bad value. This kind of idea. I hope that's clear. I developed this idea in the analytical part of the essay, and then I apply it to a number of different examples, historical examples. McCarthyism. I, in the essay, tell the story of Philipp Jenninger, who was president of the Bundestag in West Germany. This is before the reunification of Germany in the 1980s, and the 50th anniversary of Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass, a pogrom against Jews in Germany. Hitler, he was recalling the atmosphere that prevailed in Germany in the 1930s, the anti-Semitism that was rampant, and he did so in very vivid terms. He himself is a liberal, pro-Israel person who was appalled at what happened, but he wanted to remind his audience of exactly what happened, and he was vivid and explicit in doing so, and was forced to resign when the audience reacted so negative. People got up and walked out of the speech because even though he clearly was not a celebrant of Nazism, his willingness to vividly describe the reality of Nazism in a way that was not socially acceptable was the source of this censorious reaction from his audience. Now, that sends a signal to people about what can and can't be said, and it leads to a kind of stultified discourse, this kind of idea. But I'm getting ahead of myself here because this is the subject of my lecture tomorrow here at UATX. I don't want to tip my hand too much.
Awesome. Well, and it poses so many questions, which hopefully we'll get to some of. I know the students will have lots of questions for you tomorrow. They always do. And it draws out something that I've been wrestling with lately, because on one hand, speech is never free. We're endowed with these inalienable rights, and I think the pursuit of happiness includes freedom of conscience and freedom of speech. And I'm so grateful for those freedoms. And I know personally from the last few years just the costs of speech. And this is perhaps too much to get into now, but I wonder sometimes at the tension, if there is a tension sometimes between something being free and the good and pursuing the good, and how we are to navigate that. Because with the example you started with about the fear of being called transphobic, that has been such a real fear for so many of us for years now. And yet I would say the problem is not just the self-censorship that has arisen from that fear, but it's also the lunacy, to show my cards at risk of being called names. It's the lunacy of pushing a lie when a woman is a woman. And so I struggle sometimes to know, are we concerned here with freedom, or are we concerned with truth and lies, or is it a bit of both, if that makes any sense?
It stimulates me to think. So I have a maxim that I repeat in this essay: there's no such thing as free speech. I mean, there are constitutional prohibitions against the government curtailing one's right to express oneself. But there's no getting away from the fact that if you're heard to say something, people are going to think of you the way they're going to think of you in virtue of having heard you say it. That's the cost that must be paid. Now, we could complain about it. Oh, woe is me. Or we could realize that the implications of our freedom are in part revealed by the fact that we can choose to pay the price of speaking the truth, even if it's costly. In fact, if it weren't costly, maybe there wouldn't be such heroism and human dignity involved in speaking the truth. Maybe it's only that the commissar may actually come around and lock up Vaclav Havel and his colleagues for the anti-totalitarian rhetoric that they distributed via samizdat in underground publications. Maybe the possibility of that cost is what makes so human and so heroic their act. And without the specter of that cost, they could never really show themselves to be living fully within the truth, to be eschewing the easy comfort of the lie. There had to be a cost in order for it to be a heroic act in the first place. Maybe the utilitarianism of the people who count the cost and the benefits before they decide to stick their finger up into the wind to see which way it's blowing before they act, that utilitarianism is an inferior moral stand relative to the person who simply says, I'm going to speak the truth, come what may, perhaps paying for that even with their life. Certainly that was not maximizing their utility. It was not giving them the happiness that the utilitarians seek, but it was an expression of their humanity. Something like that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That was beautiful. And in addition to Havel, what is one text, perhaps from the course you designed, that listeners should search out and read?
I'd say Orwell's Politics in the English Language is worth their attention. And then there is my 1994 essay to be republished as a small book in a couple of weeks now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Glenn.
Thank you, Audrey.